It is very important for Jim Harbaugh to be able to gain the trust of his players, and after hearing from some of them at the NFL Scouting Combine, it's easy to see why his players love him so much.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 8 seasons together, but this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen, and thank you to the everydayers out there. And to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, it's all about the superstar head coach Jim Harbaugh on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. So we're going to talk about all of the amazing stories that we got from the Combine, all of the reasons why his players love him, how he's able to build those relationships, especially with his quarterbacks, and how he is able to continuously change the culture everywhere that he goes.
And him just being a total weirdo, but him connecting with his players, it has never stopped him yet. But it's easy to see how it translates, because that's a hard thing to quantify. Yeah. But with him, and you hear these players, how much they love him, it's easy to see why it works and why he's been so successful. But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. David, we know with Jim Harbaugh, so much of what he brings to the table is the Jim Harbaugh way, whether it's, you know, having a strong defense, whether it's having a team that's very physical and tough, right? Or whether it's just him and all the success that he's had. You don't get all of those things unless you get the buy-in from your players. And it was great. Eric Smith, the Chargers team writer, and also Chris Rim from ESPN have both come out with great things about Jim Harbaugh, talking to his former players. And it's easy to see how he can get the buy-in, because when you're a weirdo like him, when you ask your players the kinds of things that Jim Harbaugh asked them, you need to get the buy-in, and it's easy to see from how these players talked about it, how he got it done.
I completely agree. I mean, I think when you're talking about that, the first person that came to mind when I was looking at all of these quotes was Blake Corum. Blake Corum basically said, hey, any time that I needed anything for anything on the field or off the field, I knew I was able to go up to Jim Harbaugh. He said, if you ever need anything, you go into his office, you sit down, he'll tell you what it is. On the field, we'd get in these weeks where he'd say, I'm hot right now. He's putting in new plays, stuff like that. So it just goes to show you that Jim Harbaugh is the type of guy that is not just your football coach. You know, he's a guy that wants to be depended on. He wants to be relied upon, and he wants to show you that he's going to be there for you on the field and off the field. And I think that's a very clear indication and reason why he gets that buy-in and that love from his players.
Yeah, and I think with Staley, you know, he came in with a similar message about, you know, building the relationships with his players. But by the end of it, it was clear to see that it was a divided locker room, and how even though he did have that relationship with some players, it wasn't all of the players, and the rest of the guys felt left out. I mean, you're not going to hear anything about Jim Harbaugh about people feeling left out. I mean, this was his linebacker, Junior Colson, who I wouldn't mind seeing on the Chargers, by the way. He said, have you seen the way he interacts with players? People buy into him, and people love him. And Blake Corum also said, you could feel it. You could feel his energy and how much he loved the game of football, and that means a lot to us players. Players always knew that his office was always open. Blake Corum and Mike Sainristil both said that he went out of their way to help him. With Mikey Sainristil, he had said, hey, you come here, you play for me, and I promise you I'm going to have you ready for the next level. And now he's going to be, you know, maybe the top slot corner that's going to be taken off the board in this draft. He had 17 players at the Combine, so all sorts of good stuff was coming out of it. But it's easy to see, you know, why, at least how much his former players bought in. And that is such a big reason why he was able to get so successful and have so much success. But the other thing is, David, is the players buy in, at least in part, because they see him out there doing it. I mean, the amount of stories we've heard of, you know, him actually putting his hand in the dirt and getting his hands dirty is crazy. And we heard more of it from the Combine.
Yeah, we definitely did. I mean, one of the big cats, one of the big boys that's going to be coming out of this draft from Michigan, Chris Jenkins, talked about how he'd be in the workout room getting it in. I mean, he'd be in there at 6 a.m. He said, we're working out as a team. He's always trying to get his gains into. I want to say he had like 225 on the bar. He shocked us, but we were saying, yeah, that's our coach. He was getting after it. And of course, he was doing this in khakis and a polo. I mean, when you think about Jim Harbaugh, that's kind of the uniform that he brings to the table. But it's one thing for your coach to say, hey, I need you to go work out. I need you guys to go be on your stuff. But it's another thing when you see your coach in there actually working out, doing it at 60 years old, and not making any excuses, getting all the same type of gains that they were getting. I mean, I think it's really easy to see that and say, hey, he's not just saying anything about it, he's being about it.
Yeah, and I mean, to do it in his full, football uniform, I should say, right? Yeah. The khakis, the polo, as he said, from Chris Jenkins when he was talking about that, right? He's getting his workout, he's getting in his gains, in his polo, his cap, in his Sperry's, right? Nice shoes he's in there with. In the ice bath. And if you haven't taken an ice bath, like, ice baths suck. Like, it really, really is terrible.
They're horrible.
So cold. You don't really ever get used to it. It never really gets better. But that was the other interesting thing, was Josh Ball was saying, hey, he's in his khakis, in his polo, and he's jumping into the ice tub. It was crazy. So I think when you see, players saying things like that, it's easy to see, how he gets the respect. It's by putting himself in those positions. And we're going to talk about how he changed the culture at USD and how that had to do with, him putting himself in those positions as well. But like, at the end of the day, it just seems like he's just a football dude, and he gets along with these people, and he's so comfortable with his players that for one of them, he even just went to his house and ate an entire box of pizza. Because that is the weird stuff too, David. Like, you get some things that are very anecdotal, and then you just get some weird stories as well. But that's like part of the Harbaugh experience, and we know it's going to be a lot of fun. That's the fun thing about it.
That, man, it's so exciting to have Jim Harbaugh as the head coach of the Chargers, because more and more of these type of stories are going to come out. I mean, it's relatable. Like, he's a guy that you're like, I mean, hey, I know I've had situations where I've crushed an entire pizza. Like, it just happens, right? You get into it, and you're like,
just
man,
not caring that they're going to see him just down it, like, oh, hey, you guys got 3 boxes of pizza, as they said, right? He said, when you recruited me, he came on the official visit to my home. This is Michael Berry, his former linebacker. And he said, my mom had bought pizza. I think it was 3 boxes we had. He ate an entire box right there. He said, I've been flying all over the place and I'm kind of hungry. He just ate the whole box. Like, he doesn't care if people see him doing his weird stuff. Like, if he wants to eat an entire pizza, he's going to eat it.
He's unapologetically himself. He is absolutely 100% genuine. And I think that's another thing that is the reason why he gets that buy-in and that love from his players, because he is 100% Jim Harbaugh every single day. He's ready to attack the day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind, because that's what he brings to the table every day. He has that infectious type of energy. He has that presence. When he walks into a room, you know it. You see it. Everyone sees it. Everyone's eyes are glued on him. That's the presence that Jim Harbaugh brings everywhere he goes.
Yeah, when you're him, you can demand that kind of respect, right? And when he steps out, players will just inherently listen, and then you get the full buy-in when you see him doing stuff like this. I mean, I think Gandhi brought up the enthusiasm unknown to mankind, because I did think it was interesting in the interview he did with his brother on Chargers.com that he was talking about having an award for that, the guy who attacked the day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. And he picked Chris Jenkins, the guy that was telling the story about him out there lifting in his khakis. I mean, the common denominator is always he's going to be whatever we're talking about him doing, he's doing in his khakis. But I did think that was interesting. Hey, if that's a guy that won that award, you'd think maybe that's somebody that Jim Harbaugh is trying to get back on his team at the professional level, too.
It definitely would not surprise me.
No, it wouldn't surprise me at all, especially another football guy thing is just, another guy had talked to Eric Smith and just said, like, he's a big on a glass of milk and red meat guy. Like, that's just, it's all meat and potatoes with Jim Harbaugh. It's not flashy, but the way he connects with players gets it done, even if he has to do it himself, and he has done it himself, and that's what we're going to talk about, is just him putting himself in that position with Delaney Walker and the 49ers, a great story about that, and also him pushing the right buttons with his quarterbacks, because at the end of the day, it's important to remember he is a quarterback, and one of the things he's done so successfully is being able to get the most out of his quarterbacks, and it's easy to see why when you hear about this story. So we're going to get into that and much more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I do want to tell you guys about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. I also need to tell you guys about Game Time, because just because football season is over doesn't mean you're not going to be going out anymore. And Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're going to have. And when I tell you that your tickets are guaranteed, that's where the Game Time guarantee comes in, and it means that you'll always get the best price, because if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. You will actually make money off of it. And the other great thing about them is they always show you the view from your seat. You're not going to show up, right, and see that you can't actually see the field, or that you're behind some pillar or something like that. You get to know the exact experience you're going to have and the exact view that you're going to have from it. It's the reason why it's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country. And right now you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account, redeem that code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. David, I want to get to more of these Harbaugh-isms that we have to talk about. And one of the things that really struck me when reading through all of the stories was just the stories about him being a quarterback and also what he's been able to do for his quarterback. So one of the things we talked about in the last segment was just like, he proves it to his players because he'll get out there and actually do it himself. Yeah. And Chris Rim from ESPN had a great story about that. He said Delaney Walker, who was great in 49ers time, told a story about how one day he came to practice and saw a quarterback he had never seen before wearing the number 4 jersey. The players were getting worried because Alex Smith had missed practice. They had a game that weekend, and they were mysteriously told that Jim Harbaugh was not showing up to practice. So you don't have your starting quarterback. You don't have your head coach out there at practice. What are you going to do? Unfortunately, they all realized that the guy that was on the field was not a quarterback that had been signed by another team. It was Jim Harbaugh, who showed up to practice in full practice gear, had his cleats, had his helmet, had his shoulder pads, and just practiced as if he was the quarterback, David. Like, that is so funny. I don't know how many guys could do that and actually still go out there and sling it, right, and be throwing it to receivers and things like that. But just another example, it's not just at the collegiate level where he's been able to do that and show that he will be willing to get his hands dirty. He did that at the NFL or at an NFL level, went through a whole practice as the team's quarterback.
I mean, what a scene that must have been. You see Jim Harbaugh in old school, like high knee socks, and he has the entire 49ers practice get up on.
Yeah.
Man, that had to be something. You walk up and see your head coach in that kind of get up, and man, I mean, that had to have been an experience. But it just goes to show you that he was in it. He was trying to be there for his team in real time and actually be there when they needed him, because Alex Smith was dealing with an injury, and Delaney Walker basically said, when he did that and we found that out, we really, really loved him after that. That was one of the moments that really said, man, we really love this guy.
Yeah, this is what he said. I think all the guys bought into that, and that's what I think made them realize, like, he is for us, not against us. And, you know, dudes really started falling in love with him then. That is, yeah, I mean, it shows you right there that he's willing to do it. He even did the conditioning with them, right? So he's out there running sprints with them. I also thought it was really interesting, the story that he had, Chris Rim, that is, about Shea Patterson, who told a story, who is Michigan's former quarterback, who was a transfer there and really, really struggled to the point where he was almost about to get benched. And then Jim Harbaugh went in and had a message for him, right? Basically, they lost a game against Wisconsin, which killed their playoff chances. Jim Harbaugh that week went and sat in the quarterback room and told him, "You're effing Shea Patterson," right? Which to the rest of us is like, okay, you're Shea Patterson. What does that mean, right? But like to him, it was exactly what he needed. He ended up playing much better through the rest of the season. I think that just goes to show you what kind of relationships that he has with his quarterbacks in knowing how to push the right buttons when things aren't always going right. Like last year, obviously that didn't happen. When things started going wrong, it spiraled for the Chargers. They still weren't good in late game situations. To have someone like this who can come in and help the quarterback kind of turn things around and get in the right headspace, I think is huge.
I mean, for Jim Harbaugh specifically, it's a guy who has done it at the NFL level for over a decade. It's a coach that has won at every level. So when he says this and he infuses that type of, confidence in you, it works. He said that, and Shea Patterson said just a little bit of a spark of confidence he gave me completely turned my season around. He helped me flip the switch from being in that dark, negative place to remembering who I was. He finished the season tossing 14 touchdown passes to only 4 interceptions over the final 7 games. So it delivered results. His words, that confidence boost, it immediately turned into positive results for his quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like I said before, the only reason that Jim Harbaugh has been able to have anywhere near the success that he's been able to have is just because he's been able to maximize his quarterback at every stop. And I think that just hearing stuff like this just makes you feel even better about the hands that Justin Herbert is in, because there are a lot of people out there that didn't think, us included, being just a little hesitant, is Jim Harbaugh the right fit for someone like Justin Herbert? Like, I guess we were really in all the way just because we just have been trusting, get this guy, look at his record of turning places around. But whether it's Shea Patterson, right? Yeah. Or Alex Smith or Colin Kaepernick or even Josh Johnson, right? Even J.J. McCarthy, the fact that that dude's getting talked about as a top 10 pick, he's been able to go in there and maximize his quarterback.
Jim Harbaugh effect.
Exactly. And I just think that's such an important aspect of this, and just the trust that you have in him to get the most out of Justin Herbert and not, run the ball 50 times a game like some people think it's going to happen. Like, this dude has done it. The proof is in the pudding. He has a proven track record. And a lot of it comes from him being able to push the right buttons with these quarterbacks, him having these relationships with his quarterback. Like, I'm so excited to see what that relationship looks like between Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh. And I think they're kind of kindred spirits, David, because in Eric Smith's article, he also talked about an experience that one prospect, right, or one player had that Jim Harbaugh was trying to recruit. And Jim Harbaugh basically just told the guy, hey, your mom's a hairdresser, right? Like, can she give me a haircut right now? Which is very similar to a story that we had with Justin Herbert, right? Having John Lott cut his hair. So, I mean, kindred spirits, these dudes care much more about football than they do about haircuts.
And this one kind of resonates with me too, because my mother is a barber. She has cut hair for over 50 years. My brother is also a licensed barber, and my sister is a cosmetologist. So this is one of those stories that I was like, really? That's crazy. But
maybe podcasting isn't David's true calling. Maybe we took him away from a life of being a barber.
Never had any interest in that, thank God. But that player was Braden McGregor, and he said, my in-home visit, I was just sitting on the couch, and I look over and my mom is cutting his hair. It was funny. I don't think a lot of people have stories like that. It just shows what kind of guy he is. Down to earth, doesn't care about names. He's just there to work. So it's just like story after story after story of being relatable and not being too big, not saying I'm Jim Harbaugh, the superstar. And yes, I do feel like this is definitely something that him and Justin Herbert share in common. Justin Herbert's known for his beautiful flowing locks, but he doesn't really care. I mean, one day it was bothering him. He gets his hair cut by the strength and conditioning coach, or the former strength and conditioning coach of the Chargers, and he comes out and he has a complete buzz cut, and everyone goes and loses their mind.
Yeah.
But that is definitely something that him and Jim Harbaugh share. They're a little weird, a little quirky like that. Hopefully no more haircuts by the strength and conditioning staff.
Yeah, I mean, but hey,
you might end up bald.
Yeah, well, look at Ben Herbert, right?
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, like I wouldn't put it past Ben Herbert to be able to know how to cut some hair as well. I mean, the guy seems like
that dude's super talented, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Justin Herbert's haircut looked terrible. I felt terrible for him because he had to field questions about it. But like, that's just because he didn't care. Like, he wasn't thinking at the time, like, hey, what am people going to say if I get this haircut? He was thinking like, hey, I'm trying to get a workout in. This hair is bothering me. It's got to go. And that's as simple as that. And I think you see that both these guys are just football dudes who care so much more about football than they do about the other mundane things in their life, right? There's a reason why Jim Harbaugh wears the same outfit every day because it's one less decision that
One
he
less
has to
decision.
make because he's just focusing and thinking about football all day, every day. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting from the Chris Rim article was actually getting an in-depth look at how he changed the culture at USD. And that might be a little surprising, but it partially started by beating former Chargers head coach Brandon Staley and making a big deal out of that. So we're going to talk about some more Harbaughisms, right? And how basically Jim Harbaugh ended Brandon Staley's Dayton career and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfer is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. David, we have some more great Jim Harbaugh stories to get to, but I wanted to get to one that just showed you how he turned a program around. We know what the track record is, but we don't necessarily know exactly how he got in there, got into a, situation where the team was really struggling and brought them back to prominence, right? But I do want to tell everyone to make sure they're checking out the first ever 24/7 national sports streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today, where you can get local experts giving you the insight that only they can from all the sports from around all of the leagues. So make sure you guys go subscribe to that. But David, there's a great story from Chris Rim in his Jim Harbaugh article when he talks about how he went in and changed the culture at USD. Part of it was he went in there, he had just only been not playing football in the NFL for 2 seasons, right? He had come from being the Raiders quarterback coach for 2 years. But before that, he was just in the league, right? He was captain comeback, and that's what kind of earned him the respect. But it didn't actually sink in until he came up and really shook the culture up.
Yeah, I mean, before he got to USD, that organization, that college franchise was not successful at all. They were bad. So Jim Harbaugh had to come in, and he had to kind of give them a reason to fight, give them something to kind of galvanize around. And so that was a flag, a very, 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 meaningless type of thing until meaning was put behind it. So before Harbaugh arrived, San Diego had won 1 game against its biggest rival, the University of Dayton, since joining the Pioneer Football League in 1993. Harbaugh won his first matchup in 2004, 38-35, with a game-sealing interception by Bakhtiari, who dropped into coverage to pick off Dayton quarterback Brandon Staley, the Chargers' former coach who was fired in December, and, of course, the guy that was replaced by Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, everything comes full circle, but that was an interesting thing because they were rivals, but there was nothing to really signify it. And what ended up happening is Jim Harbaugh, after beating Brandon Staley and the Dayton team, he decided, hey, we're having a flag. And then when they showed up the next year, they just had a flag that had an inscription on it showing that the score was from the last year prior. Another team just kind of like, what is happening? And he went up and told the coach, hey, we're doing this now. This is a good rivalry, and now we have this flag. And of course, we have the flag because we won the game last year. Like, you couldn't have had it because
we beat you twice in a row. And
right. And so the other team didn't want anything to do with it. They ended up keeping the flag both the other years that Jim Harbaugh was there. And as soon as Jim Harbaugh left, they lost the game. The other team took the flag, and the flag was never to be played for again. But he realized, hey, how do I get the players up for this big-time matchup? They've been losing this game for most of the last decade. How do I give them an extra little gear, an extra little chip on their shoulder to try to go, have them go do this thing and break the way that it had been, right? And he said they were so mad, but it was cool, man. He artificially created this trophy game, but it got us all pumped up. We were all about the flag. So his players loved it. The other team hated it, and that is something that's definitely somewhat of a theme for Jim Harbaugh. But the other thing he did there, too, to change the culture was just at USD, they had this giant hill, right? The way he ended up shaking up the culture was he had these players start running up a hill they said was about 400 meters. So basically 4 football fields worth of hill. Of course, Jim Harbaugh, as we've talked about before, wanted to get his hands dirty as well. He started sprinting up the hill with the players. And then obviously as, back then wasn't 60, but as an older dude, ends up as he's in full sprint, throws up over his shoulder, doesn't stop there, just keeps going. And as the player said, it seemed like it was just something that was just getting in an inconvenience to, his goal. And they ended up calling it the Harbaugh Hill, right? But it is also part of that, changing the conditioning, changing how things are done and trying to really shake up the culture. And for them, it worked when he did that. But the other thing, as far as, doing things that other teams won't like, but that, gets your team to rally around him, one of the most famous examples is the handshake. And I could probably just leave it at that. But it was a handshake between Jim Schwartz and Jim Harbaugh playing each other in 2011, the 4-1 49ers against the 5-0 Lions. And Jim Harbaugh, before the game, told his players, we're going to win this game, and I'm going to go up there and give him the hardest handshake that he's ever had. And he followed through with it, David, and chaos ensued.
So funny. I love it. Not only did the touchdown stand, but the Niners were penalized 15 yards. Schwartz waved his arms for the crowd to get loud and yelled over at Harbaugh to know the rules. This was after, they had scored a touchdown, and Jim Harbaugh didn't like it. And obviously all touchdowns are automatically reviewed by officials, even back then. And, obviously Jim Harbaugh didn't really like the fact that he said, know the rules. So he said, so maybe I took a little offense to that. Harbaugh said with a smile, the hard handshake was in response to that. But it was just one of those things where he told his players, hey, we're going to go win this football game, and I am going to go shake his hand, and I'm going to make a statement when I do it. And so when he did that, it really galvanized all the players. And Delaney Walker basically said, hey, you can go watch the tape. We were all ready to go to war. We were ready to battle for our head coach. We were going to make sure nothing happened in that situation. But they, after that, and in the locker room, they were all celebrating it and loving the fact that that happened.
I mean, just even being willing to do that, like when it's going to stir things up, because it wasn't even his first time. I mean, when he was at Stanford, he played against USC. He didn't like USC, and then he went up and then hit Pete Carroll on the back, and then Pete Carroll was chasing him into the locker room. Similar situation. He went to the pros and nothing changed, right? He definitely rubs other coaches and things the wrong way. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but he did it all for his players, right? He's basically saying, like, I know this is going to be a thing. Like, I'm willing to kind of make this person upset to make my team happy. And I don't care what the outside world looking in does. All I care is about what happens in this locker room and how they respond to it. Like you said, Delaney Walker said dudes was ready to get suspended for him. Right. Like, and they were. I mean, you watch it back, you can see like those dudes were ready to fight for him. And he needs that. Like, if we're a Jim Harbaugh team, to be a Jim Harbaugh team, if the Chargers are going to emulate the success that he's had at all these other stops, the one main thing has been the buy-in that he gets from his players, right? And when you see that, that was his first season. That wasn't, after the 3 straight NFC championship games in the Super Bowl. Yeah. This is before any of that, right? Like, this is when he still felt like he needed to prove this to his team. He needed to prove to his team, hey, you can go out there and beat the 5-0 Lions. And when we do it, not if we do it, when we do it. Yeah. I'm going to go do this to really rub it in their face. Yeah, but he did get a little stirred up. But it sounded a little premeditated even before Jim Schwartz was yelling across the field, know the rules, right? But Jim Schwartz definitely had to eat that crow, definitely pretty hard. But I think the thing you kind of take away from this, David, is just like, if he can get the buy-in, it should be a really successful turnaround for the Chargers. And how long it takes, we don't know at this point, right? Yeah. But like, it's going to be a lot of fun along the way. There's going to be so many good stories we're going to get out of this. Not that I don't care if it goes good. Like, obviously, it's only a success if the Chargers can turn this thing around and be successful. But, like,
without a doubt,
I'm so excited for the ride that we're about to go on, right? Because we just know we're going to get the Harbaugh-isms, right, throughout this tenure. And it just,
the sideshow is going to be fun.
It is. And, like, even like with his brother, like, they just have all these other Harbaughs and stuff like that. One of my favorite ones that came out of the other interview was just, life is short, run to the football.
Run to the ball.
that was one of my favorite things. It's like, hey, and then, like, let's see how many players we can get around the football. Like, we might not be able to get 11 because this guy is contained over here, but, like,
9?
Can 10? We get 9? Can we get 10 players touching the guy that has the ball and turning it into a game, right? And turning it into a competitive thing. And the competitive nature and the relationships he's built with these guys has lasted a long time. You're getting these quotes from players who played for him 20 years ago. That's the Jim Harbaugh effect, and I'm glad that we get to be here to cover it because it should be a lot of fun. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. We will back with you guys tomorrow with Free Agency Friday, talking about our favorite fits for the Chargers in free agency. We know they don't have a lot of money to spend, but if they do spend a little bit, there are a few guys out there that would improve them dramatically, and that number only goes up as more players keep getting cut from around the league. So to make sure you guys don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. If you support the show and you're everydayer, you can do both. Subscribe on YouTube, right? Subscribe or follow on wherever you get your podcast from. It all helps the show and supports us. You can also find the show every day on our social media. You can find us on Twitter at LockedOnLAC or on Instagram at LockedOnChargers, including our own personal accounts on Twitter, me at Dan Talk Sports and David Drugemeyer at DroTalkSD. But make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for Free Agency Friday. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.